Hello, and welcome to Empower Your Menopause, the podcast where we bust myths, challenge outdated health advice, and empower women to thrive in midlife and beyond. It's coaches Julie and James here, and today we're going to dive into an often overlooked but really important piece of the menopause puzzle, and that is your gut health. So, if you've ever struggled with things like bloating, digestive issues, or food sensitivities that seem to have gotten worse in midlife or just appeared out of nowhere, you are not alone. There's actually a direct link between gut health and menopause symptoms, and addressing gut imbalances can have a significant impact on your overall well being, everything from hormone metabolism to mental clarity and energy levels. So, to help us navigate this topic, which is very complex but also very fascinating, we are thrilled to welcome special guest Sarah Brown, who is a registered nutrition therapist, certified metabolic balance coach, and founder of Good Food Works. So, Sarah has been supporting women with IBS, food sensitivities, and stubborn gut issues since 2012, and she is passionate about helping women in midlife uncover what's really going on when bloating, fatigue, or brain fog start to take over. So, welcome, Sarah.
Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here. It's lovely to meet you both.
Good. Sarah, why don't we start off by just giving us a little bit of context? I feel as though every coach that we've ever met has got a fascinating backstory as to how they got into it, why they got into it. So why don't you just tell our listeners a little bit about you? Who is Sarah and why do you do this?
Yeah. So yeah, as with so many therapists in different modalities, I came into nutritional therapy because of my own issues. I had in my 30s, I was having quite bad digestive issues. Now that had followed a career. I was a holiday rep years ago. I was a holiday rep, and I lived in India and lived all over the place. But when I came back to the UK, I noticed in my 30s I was having really bad digestive issues from bloating, diarrhea, stomach pain whenever I ate anything. And it was an absolute nightmare that sort of plagued me all through my career, which was then in marketing. But it took me until I was about 40 before I discovered this thing called nutritional therapy. And up until then, I'd been sort of trying all sorts of different solutions to try and sort my problems out. Nothing was really working. Somebody said to me, "You should go and see a nutritional therapist." And I was like, "What is a nutritional therapist?" Um, and I happen to I live very close to Richmond, so in Surrey. And in Richmond, you've got the Institute for Optimum Nutrition, which is one of the main colleges for training nutritional therapists to high diploma and degree level. So I went to an open day, and because I hadn't found somebody to work with, I ended up signing on for the course so that I could sort my own problems out, thinking it would be quite, it would be something nice to do at the weekends, and that would be it. Oh my God, absolutely life changing. As it's a very intense course of study. You never stop learning with nutrition because it's such a new science. Um, but over the course of the 4 years study, I did find that the solution for me was that I had picked up H. pylori along my travels. And once I knew that and I was able to deal with that, it led me to, I mean, it was life changing. Again, you probably know that when you've got gut issues and it's not just affecting your gut, but it's causing brain fog or it's causing low energy, it really plays with your whole life, your career. You can't function properly at work, you can't participate fully in social events, all sorts of things are impacted. So for me, it was such a life-changing experience that I was like, right, when I qualify, I am going to specialize in gut health, because there are so many people around like me that have these debilitating symptoms, not too sure what to do about them, very often just live with them. And very often, they've been diagnosed with IBS, but they've been told there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to learn which foods are your triggers and learn to live with it. So that's why I sort of came into working with people with gut health problems. And as I've sort of got older and gone through menopause age and so on, it struck me that there are so many people, so many women who have either had perfectly healthy guts up until their menopause and then suddenly found that, you know, things are going out of kilter, or they've always had IBS, but because it's got so much worse at menopause, that's when they've started looking for solutions.
Yeah.
So I'm finding myself working now more and more now with women aged between sort of 50 and 60, in that sort of phase of life.
Sure. It's a fascinating story. It's incredible when you look back at people's history, isn't it? How just sort of like a trip abroad. I know you were a holiday rep and you were
Yeah,
out there for a long time, but a trip
yeah,
abroad like 10, 20, 30 years ago can set you on a course of illness and
exactly.
pathology that you wouldn't be aware of, and whose mind goes back to those
No,
20 or
no,
30 years, right?
no, exactly,
And that's why
exactly.
what we do, I think, is so crucial when it comes to this, and particularly for you working in gut health specifically. I think it's really important that there's somebody there who can ask those questions about going further back than just common symptoms.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about getting that history and really understanding where the problems seem to start. Sometimes it relates back to a trip like that, a trip to
Sure.
somewhere fairly exotic where some bug's been picked up. Sometimes it just leads back to a very stressful period in someone's life
Yeah.
where, you know, stress has had that massive impact on their gut. Everything's been thrown out of kilter and they've never known to go and look at things to rebalance. So yeah, there's lots of different things that actually you can do, and that again is the wonderful thing about working with gut health. There are so many things that you can do to get back onto the straight and narrow, and to get somebody back to living their life, you know, completely freely and how they want to, rather than having to think about where the next loo break is going to be, or where you know,
Yeah.
plan their journey by where the toilets are going to be, or are they going to go to this social function because they don't want to eat the food that they're given, they've got this special diet, and you know, all these things you can stop thinking about. When you
Yeah.
find a solution to your gut problems, you can stop thinking about them and just go out and have fun.
Sure. So as you've been doing this for longer, you've said before you work more now with women 50, 60-ish in that kind of age bracket. We tend to call that the menopause transition because we'd like to work with people starting
Yeah,
in their 40s and preparing them for menopause.
yeah.
But then obviously post-menopause is such a crucial period for female health as well. I wonder if you could speak to us a little bit then about why gut health is so crucial during the menopause transition years, and maybe talk about the kind of gut related symptoms you actually see most often when it comes to women going through the
Yeah.
menopause transition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned before, I tend to see sort of two groups of women. Some that have experienced gut issues before the menopause, and those that have developed them, you know, after, and very often put all of their symptoms down to menopause, but actually it's the effect that that's having on their gut that needs looking at. So, you know, we're talking about the same types of symptoms, all of the range of gut issues, from bloating, um, constipation, diarrhea, gut pain, to the associated things like fatigue and brain fog and mood disorders. All of those sorts of things can come back to the gut, and sometimes it is the direct impact of the gut microbiome and the estrogen factor, which Julie mentioned earlier. But sometimes, you know, the problems are already there. We're talking about maybe a dysbiosis where you've got an imbalance of gut flora historically,
Mm,
or like in my case, you've got a pathogen that's been with you for years. I mean, parasites and pathogens, they are crafty little things. They they cause problems to us, but not bad enough problems that we go and find them and get rid of them,
mm,
because they've got a cozy little home in the gut. They
sure.
don't want anything to upset that. So, you know, sometimes the symptoms are just a bit annoying, but not bad enough to go and sort them out.
Mm,
But they can be causing brain fog, fatigue, you know, depending on what type of microbe you're talking about. You've also got food sensitivities, which is another big area that I deal with, where, you know, IgG mediated food sensitivities, where foods are triggering antibody production, and it's those antibodies and the immune system that is actually involved in creating the digestive symptoms and inflammation in the gut, but also, again, things like headaches or joint aches and pains, or skin disorders, respiratory problems, poor sleep. Everything like that can be connected to something like a food sensitivity that starts in the gut. And other things, you've got histamine intolerance, you've got what else? Lactose intolerance, high FODMAP foods, all sorts of different triggers going on. So you've got that range of things that might be at play before menopause hits.
Yeah.
But then when we get to menopause and we start going through the perimenopause, and you get that fluctuation in estrogen levels in particular, that's where we start to feel more of an impact on the microbiome. So it comes back to how our gut bacteria are interacting or being affected by estrogen levels. So estrogen can very much influence and moderate what goes on with the microbiome. There are actually specific bacteria involved in the microbiome called, if I can say it right, the estrobolome, which are those particular estrogen sensitive bacteria that metabolize and modulate estrogen levels throughout the body. So if once your estrogen levels start to change during menopause, it can affect your whole gut bacteria balance.
Yeah.
And that can then allow some of those other problems to develop. So if your gut bacteria suddenly becomes imbalanced and you've not got the right microbes to help metabolize food and break down food, you're going to start getting bloating and digestive pain, because you're literally having food passing through the gut in a poorly broken down state. It's not able to be digested fully because your
And
microbiome as well is imbalanced.
and that tends to be where you get that inflammatory response, isn't it, of your body
Yeah,
actually seeing the food as a foreign invader, if you like, in inverted commas, and then your immune system
exactly.
kicks into play. You've got those IgG antibodies that you were talking about. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in
And
which case, it seems as though there's a lot of intertwining of the symptoms and the causes and things here. So, I'm going to put you on the spot now then. What comes first in a chicken or egg scenario? Is it gut health or menopause?
I would say it's gut health, but understanding the impact of estrogen and hormones, sex hormones generally, on the microbiome. So it's the microbiome that is at the key, is the key to all of this,
Yeah.
because that's the part of the gut that changes most frequently. It can change from day to day, because the microbiome is trillions and trillions of living bacteria, and every day you could eat the same thing, but one day you could feel fine, the next day you could feel terrible, and it's all to do with the fluctuations in those bacterial levels. So one of the if you start off with a healthy, balanced microbiome, I would say that you're more likely to not feel as bad effects as your estrogen levels change, and as that starts to affect your microbiome. What happens is, as your estrogen levels fluctuate and ultimately decrease, your microbial diversity decreases. And that's where we find that you don't have the bacteria that are necessary to metabolize certain foods, or to support your immune function and to help you produce antibodies or neurotransmitters. So that's where a lot of mood disorders can come from. If you don't have the bacteria that produce neurotransmitters on the gut wall, you may feel that you've got low mood more often, which is obviously very common with menopause again. So that's one of the many things, and I'm beginning to lose my train of thought because I've got so much I want
That's
to say.
quite all right. So it
That's
sounds
okay.
then like you're potentially starting off with a microbiome that, and I appreciate that you said that it changes every day, but if we view it like a garden and we want to sort of like have the healthier bits flourishing and do a little bit of weeding,
Yeah,
and we've got a nice balance there, then having that balance before you go into the menopause years is probably a good place to start. So there's an argument, I suppose, for starting to work on
yeah,
your gut health way before you even enter perimenopause, right? So in your
absolutely.
20s and 30s. So you've already got that, you've got it in the bank, if you like, for when estrogen does start fluctuating up and down and starts
That's
causing some
yeah, that's
problems.
a really good way of putting it. It's a really good way of putting it. And I think the effect of the gut and the effect of the microbiome is one of the most underestimated areas of health because it does such a great job of balancing us out and supporting us that it gets quite a lot of abuse, quite a lot of dietary abuse, and it can still keep going. So, and if you are one of those people that has always had digestive issues, you know to look after it, you know to
Mm,
support it. But if you've never really had to worry about it until you get to your sort of mid 40s, then it becomes a bit of a shock. And that's that's where you may have to look at some fairly big dietary changes.
yeah.
You know,
For sure. Yeah,
so
I know I've experienced that firsthand, most definitely. So now you've talked about how estrogen declining also shows a decline in the microbiome diversity. So how do estrogen and progesterone really directly affect, or do they directly affect gut function?
they do. Progesterone normally is sort of is calming things down and settling things out, but it's the estrogen levels, um, particularly versus there's a really interesting study, and I can't remember the name of it specifically, but there's an interesting twin study where twins their microbiome was studied, and when they got to puberty, a male twin, his microbiome would be very, very different to the female twin. And then when they went through sort of as they aged, and then they got to that point where the woman was going through menopause, her microbiome started to look a lot more like his. So you can see that that there are, and obviously there are so many more, as with everything, there's always so many more studies that are needed to be done to really draw clear conclusions from everything. But there's certainly a sex hormone influence on the diversity of the microbiome.
Let's move on to maybe talking about some practical strategies for supporting gut health then. What kind of things from a dietary lifestyle habit thing do you see that can help support a healthy gut?
So for me, a lot of the time I'm speaking to people at the moment about moving away from very much the processed food end of things, which is where a lot of people, we're sort of often talking to people who are stressed and time poor. So that often leads them towards a processed or ultra processed diet. So the first thing to do is to move away from that as much as possible towards a clean diet,
Mm,
by which I mean sort of making your meals from scratch with good quality vegetables, good quality protein, and good healthy carbohydrates. The reason for that is that the processed foods contain chemicals, additives, emulsifiers, preservatives. They can have an impact on estrogen levels and hormone levels, but they also have an inflammatory effect on the gut generally. And that is going to disturb the
mm,
microbiome. It's also potentially going to aggravate the gut wall, leading to the food sensitivities that we mentioned before. So lots of different reasons why getting away as much as possible from processed foods is going to be beneficial.
mm,
And then in terms of supporting the microbiome itself, it really is about introducing as many and as varied a diet in terms of fruits and vegetables and fiber. So
mm,
the microbiome thrives when it has fiber or fermented foods, that the sort of the sauerkrauts and the kimchis and so on, the prebiotic foods, they feed our friendly bacteria.
mm,
Whereas sugar, a diet that's high in carbohydrates or sugar, is going to feed the pathogenic bacteria, the bad guys, which we
mm,
don't want to do. So those are sort of the first two things. Clean up your diet generally. Make sure you've got plenty of good quality fiber to feed those microbiome, those microbes. Um, I normally talk to people about trying to get 30 different fruits or vegetables into their diet each week. So I do something called the 50 food challenge with people, but 30 of those foods I want to see being a vegetable or a fruit or something fibrous.
Okay. And what would the
So
other 20 be then in that case?
well, I'm sort of fairly open to that, but yeah, dairy or protein or whatever. So long as I've got my 30 fruit and veg from people, I'm quite happy.
Yeah. So
And I'm not talking about 30 portions across the week. I'm talking about 30 different, because
30 different
obviously
types.
Okay.
all the different fruits and vegetables are feeding different types of microbes. So that's where you're going to get your diversity from.
Yeah. When it comes to things like gut health, and people talk about the gut lining and intestinal permeability and all this kind of stuff, and basically what we're talking about there is sort of like some gaps in the gut lining that allows undigested food to get to the bloodstream and cause some
Yeah.
intolerance style reactions or allergenic style reactions. Is there anything women can do at this stage of life that can help actually protect that gut wall that is the wall that is, I suppose, supporting the microbiome and the microbiome's living on?
Yeah, absolutely. So my go-to strategy normally, I'm you can use things like bone broth, which
Mm.
will provide a lot of the nutrients needed to support the gut wall. My go-to, because a lot of people just aren't into bone broth, and you know, if you're not, I'm not going to ever push somebody to make something or eat something that they really, really don't like. Um, I supplement with L-glutamine. So L-glutamine is an amino acid. It's a protein that helps us rebuild smooth muscle. And because the gut is one long tube of smooth muscle, glutamine is actually the preferred fuel to help the gut cells rebuild and replenish. So that's sort of a really good preventative. I work with a lot of people that have IgG food sensitivities and therefore, you know, have the leaky gut
Mm.
scenario probably happening. So glutamine is the sort of the go-to for supporting that in particular.
Yeah. So just to recap some of that advice then for listeners, we're talking about trying to reduce processed foods as much as we can,
Yeah,
reducing things like sugars and easily digestible starches, promoting a diet really, really high in lots of colourful veg, fruit, high in fibre. So, as you said,
yeah,
30 different fruits and veg there a week. And then also from a gut health perspective, potentially a bone broth. And I agree with you, some people tend to
yeah,
love it and some people hate it. Personally, I can drink it like I would do a
yeah,
cup of tea. Other people find it far too
yes,
slimy
yeah,
to do that.
yeah.
And then the other thing would be as well, potentially an L-glutamine supplement. So just for anybody who doesn't know about that, Sarah, could you just tell us a little bit about what form that comes in? Are there any specific types of supplement they might want to look for? How would they take it?
Okay, so glutamine comes as a powder. It's a synthetic replacement of glutamine that we can produce in the body, but it comes as a powder or as a capsule. And I normally recommend taking about 1,000 milligrams a day, which is normally, if you take it as a powder, you just mix it into some water, just a teaspoon, and then drink that down. I think from memory, it tastes like licorice, so it's quite a nice taste. And if people don't like drinking water, it will give your water some flavour. So that's always quite a good
Yeah.
bonus as well. Or you can take it as a capsule. You know, some people like to just take it as a capsule, get it out of the way for the day, just take it first thing in the morning. That's all you need to do. It will still reach the site of action. There's no preference whether it's a capsule or a powder that you're taking. They will both be as effective. What was your other question? Sorry, James. Was there other thing
Uh,
about it? Oh, any
oh,
brands?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of brands, everybody, I mean, all the major brands will have a glutamine supplement of some sort. When I'm working with people, I've always tended to work with a brand called Nutri Advanced.
Mhm.
It's very, you probably know it, yeah, it's very well
There's
researched.
supplements that we recommend for people as well. We're big fans of
Right,
Advanced, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, me too. So NutriAdvance and BioCare are probably my go-to
Mm,
supplements for most things. And then obviously, other brands for different purposes. But those would be the go-to. That's the sort of standard that you want.
mm.
Great. Well,
And
and
I
speaking of
just
supplements,
mentioned,
oh, go ahead.
sorry,
Sorry.
I was just going to say, I just mentioned about water as well, and that's obviously also very good for gut health. You want to make sure that you've got plenty of water in your diet, particularly if you're suddenly increasing your fiber.
Mm,
So if you are somebody that is going from a processed diet and saying, okay, I'm going to work on this and I'm not going to go straight to 30 foods a day, but I'm going to get up there, you want to make sure that you are um, having a lot of water with that. Otherwise, it can cause more problems than it resolves. So you might find that, you suddenly start getting bloated when you didn't get bloated before. And that's going to be because you're having too much fiber too quickly. So if you are starting from zero, build it up gradually, have plenty of water. The other thing with water is just to say, in terms of elimination, that's a big part of gut health as well. Making sure that you are not constipated, you're not retaining any stools. If you retain stools, it's possible there are certain enzymes in the gut that can deconjugate, which means separate the things that they're removing,
mm,
that the stool is removing when it's collecting waste from the body through the bowel. And one of those things can be estrogen. So, sometimes it can be a useful thing to extract estrogen and recycle it in the body. Other times you don't want that to happen.
mm.
So again, you want to make sure that you are having regular bowel movements, and that's going to be helped by a combination of the fiber and water.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I was told a much more crass way to remember that, but to lube the tubes. um, but yeah, and I can say that L-glutamine has been a game changer for me personally, and we even use it for our dog because he's got very sensitive digestion ever since he was a puppy.
Oh
And so we've
wow,
been feeding that to him with his dinner with bone broth that I make, and it just helped him immensely.
that's
So we're all,
that's
yeah.
brilliant. Yeah, that's fantastic.
So we're down the supplement line just quickly. L-glutamine is great, and you also see everybody talking about, oh, you got to take your probiotics, oh, you got to take your prebiotics, you got to take this supplement, that supplement. What are there other things that you support people taking, or things that you recommend people use caution with? Because I know just throwing a whole bunch of
Yeah,
um, drugstore supplements isn't necessarily a good
yeah.
approach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, there are good supplements, and there are some that, aren't really worth it. And that's why I stick with brands like NutriAdvanced and BioCare and, a few other key ones as well. But in an ideal world, it wouldn't be necessary. And I wouldn't tell people you need to take a probiotic. But I think if somebody's starting off from a place where possibly they've had very stressful period in their life. Stress, just to sort of touch on that if I can. When we have high levels of stress, it really plays havoc with our gut. The reason being that it raises our levels of cortisol, and cortisol downregulates our digestive function, by which I mean it slows down or stops the production of stomach acid. Stomach acid is the main component of, well, it's the main thing that protects the gut from anything passing, anything that we ingest goes through the stomach. Any negative bacteria, anything that we don't really want going through, should be killed off by our stomach acid. But if stomach acid is low because we're stressed, there's more chance that we're going to end up with an imbalance of gut flora, where
Mm,
we've got too many bad bacteria competing for space and very often winning that space over the friendly bacteria that we want. So if somebody is coming to me, or their symptoms through menopause are being exacerbated because they're going through it, and menopause itself is so stressful, so it's highly likely that they're going to be feeling worsening digestive issues because of this side as well. In which case, I'm fully supportive of taking a good quality probiotic and just boosting up the friendly bacteria. Okay, so in an ideal world, you would be getting and you would have the sort of microbiome that just by feeding it with all the vegetables and the fiber that we've mentioned would be enough to support it. But in the real world, let's be honest, it doesn't always happen that way. So a bit of a boost of a good quality probiotic supplement is very helpful for a lot of people.
Perfect.
Great. And with all of these things, just one other question is, are there tests, like functional tests that women can take to get some of these answers? How do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can do food sensitivity tests. So if they feel that you've got this cascade of high stress, sudden onset of bloating or digestive issues or fatigue or whatever, and they think actually it might be linked to a food, but they can't identify which one it is, because with food sensitivities, it's notoriously difficult. There's quite a big gap, 2 to 72 hours after eating a food before you can get symptoms sometimes. So you can do food sensitivity tests. I work with York Test in the UK, who do a good test. I also recommend for certain people, if they feel that actually problems have existed before menopause, but actually they've never done anything about them and they think maybe it might be microbial, doing a stool test is really effective, and that is best done with a practitioner. So find a nutritional therapist or naturopath that you can work with who can get that test organized for you and then can do a full analysis on the results and provide you, tailored advice of how to go about things when you've got those results. So those are probably the two main tests that I would use in clinic: food
Yeah.
sensitivity test and stool testing.
Yeah.
Um,
And I think it's worth just saying as well that when it comes to the food sensitivity testing, I know you use York Test, very well known company here in the UK. I think it's important just to highlight as well that people don't fall for some of these deals that they see where people are claiming
yes.
and diagnose 400 different sensitivities from one strand of hair and the kind of
Oh,
bioresonance thing and things like that. So we're talking about here, when you do a
yeah,
York test, it's a finger prick blood test, isn't it? It's sent back to the lab and it's your
exactly.
blood that's being analysed. That is where you can
Yeah,
tell what the IgG level's like, rather than trying to get a piece of inert material such as hair,
exactly.
which would only show things like heavy metal toxicity and things like that. So,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of sort of baseless tests out there that you can't tell food sensitivities from a hair sample. The bioresonance, I'm not a fan of.
no.
Now that I must admit, before I trained as a nutritional therapist, and when I was still looking for answers for myself, I did go to people that did bioresonance and I did follow their process, and it helped to an extent, but never. But that was probably because they were telling me to take out of my diet the things that we know
Yeah,
are key
yeah.
triggers,
Take out all the
dairy,
key common
gluten, wheat.
allergens, and guess what?
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Things
exactly,
tend to get
exactly.
better.
So,
Yeah.
and
How
now I know
surprising.
better. And
Yeah.
I know that, with
Yeah.
something like you say, with a finger prick blood test, they're analyzing your blood sample to see if you're producing antibodies against particular food triggers.
Yeah.
The other good thing that you want to look out for, and something that you do get with York Test, is if you buy the test direct from York Test, you get a free 30-minute consultation to talk you through your results and
Nice.
to explain to you what you need to do, how you need to change things. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a brilliant add-on. And again, if you do a general test that you find on Instagram, if you don't have that support, it's really, really confusing and it can be terrifying. You can get some results through with loads of results on, and you don't know what to do because you don't get any advice.
100%. And
So,
I think the advice generally of having somebody who knows what they talk about when it comes to this, and I absolutely concur on stool tests. I've done stool tests on clients before. It's
yeah,
hard enough for people like us who are schooled in the microbiome and know what we're looking for to actually work out what the nuances are. So if you just have one
Yeah,
done or you try and read it yourself, it would be almost impossible to read the,
absolutely.
wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Perfect.
and it's actually taking things, it's not a straight read through. This is high, this is low, this is. It's taking it all together, so it can do the interpretation,
That's it.
in a way that it takes training, understanding of these things to be able to interpret things correctly and communicate that back to someone. So
Yeah,
yeah.
fabulous. Okay, Sarah, thanks ever so much for coming. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. For anybody who's interested in finding out more about yourself and how they could potentially work with you, where's the best place for women to come if they want to improve their gut health?
So at the moment, if you come to my website, which is goodfoodworks.co.uk, you can contact me there. We can have a discovery call if you'd like to chat. You'll find lots of information on the site. I also have an Instagram feed, which is Good Food Works 1. So either of those channels is where I'm most active at the moment.
Okay, we'll pop those both in the show notes as well so that
Thank
people
you.
can access them directly. Yeah.
Definitely. And for
Brilliant.
our listeners, look, if you're struggling with menopause symptoms, if you think gut health might be part of the picture, well, you don't have to think, because gut health is going to be a big part of the picture. Please, please don't ignore it. Addressing your gut issues can be a real game changer for your whole experience and your health, generally speaking. So we really appreciate your time, Sarah, and your expertise.
Yeah. Okay.
It's been lovely chatting to you. It's great to meet you both. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
Thanks
It's
a
been a
lot.
pleasure.
Okay. So tune in next week,
Okay.
everybody, as we continue to break down the science of thriving in midlife. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed today's episode, and maybe share it with somebody if you know somebody who's challenged with their gut health. In the meantime, it's been James and Julie with our new friend Sarah here, reminding you to stay strong and stay fabulous. And we will see you next time. Take care, everybody.